Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Open Source, a place where we can have conversations about really cool things that are going on in the open source space, meet some really fun people, and just have a great conversation. So today, I'm really excited for my guest. My guest today is Kayla Cinnamon. Kayla, do you want to say hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome. So, Kayla, I think most of the people probably know you as the program manager for Windows Terminal. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I want to get to know you a bit more. So one
Okay.
of the things that's really interesting to me with people in technology in general is kind of how they got started, or like what really brought technology to them and what interested them about technology. Do you have a story that you remember where you came across technology or anything like that, and that you're like, this is me, this is what I want to do?
Yeah. So I always thought I was going to be a jazz musician, which is really like the opposite of what this is.
That's really awesome, actually.
So I played saxophone and piano for a long time, and I think like senior year of high school, I was like, I don't think this is a viable career for me, and I was like, okay, well, what else could I do? And at the time, I had a Tumblr blog, and I really liked playing with the HTML and CSS piece of it, and also doing some Code Academy things. And I was like, okay, maybe I can do like web design for a living. So I majored in information technology at my school with a focus in human computer interaction to get a really good focus on like what best like UX and UI design principles are, and then got my master's in that as well. And then I came to Microsoft, and then they were like, "You're going to be on the command line," which is I was like, "What UI is on the command line?" But there is because there it's terminal. But at the time, I was like, "Okay, sure." So it kind of started from me having a blog. So I flipped gears a little bit.
So I don't know what just happened, but I completely lost my audio.
Oh,
I
okay.
have no idea what happened. I got a phone call, and now my audio's gone. So, while I try to fix this, I think we can still actually. Let me see something. I'm pretty sure because I hear you. I can see like your little audio bar moving. So let's see if I
Okay.
can actually hear you on the stream. Because if it's still you on the stream, then you can just talk um, while I try to figure
Okay.
this out. My apologies.
No
Technical
problem.
issues this morning because that's how life works, I guess. But morning. That's the world we live in. That's how life works, I guess. I have like no audio anywhere, which is very morning. That's the world we live. That's yeah. No, like no I can audio. See your audio moving, which is very morning.
Okay.
That's the world we live. That's yeah.
Okay.
No, like no I can audio. See your audio moving. So
Okay.
the world we live. That's yeah.
Okay.
No, like no I can see your audio talking about. Okay, so
Okay.
actually, I don't even
Okay.
hear you. No, like no audio. See your audio
Okay.
talking about. So so actually, sounds like that was a really great story. See your audio talking about. So actually, so one of the things I think is really your audio talking. So actually, so one of the things I really wanted to hear about. So actually, so one of the things so with technology, that was me. One of the things so I was kind of always with technology, that was me. So one of the things I was kind of always always like okay, so I was kind of always like okay, so you remember always like so always like you very much that you were more I guess very much fixing soft that you were more I guess very much housing soft soft I guess very much housing soft I don't know soft I guess very much housing soft I don't know soft I guess very much
So
housing soft I
I
don't know
didn't really
soft I guess
tinker
very
too much
much
when I was a kid.
housing soft I don't know
I
soft I guess very
definitely
much
remember I grew up on Windows. I've always been a Windows user. And I solitaire and pinball on Windows, but I didn't ever do any like software tinkering things until I was editing like web design until I was editing creating web apps in high school. And so I didn't really grow up web apps in technology. My dad is in the technology field, so I kind of watched him do some technology things, but I never kind of watched him do some technology things, but I never did too many crazy technology things. But I never playing like technology things on Microsoft, playing like technology 5 on Microsoft, playing nothing too like Microsoft, playing nothing too Microsoft, playing nothing too Microsoft, playing nothing
Still
too
not.
Microsoft, playing nothing
Still
too
not. I know there's a lot of echoing.
nothing too
Turn that up. I know there's a lot of echoing. All of a sudden, all of my audio on my. I know there's a lot of echoing. All of a sudden, all of my audio on my. I know there's a lot of. There we go. Can you say something?
Hello, yes.
Now I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
That's fine.
No?
I just heard myself, which is better. I don't know if anybody has heard anything you've said then, because your thing's moving. Oh, goodness gracious. This is quite an interesting experience. Hello? How about now? Still no. How about now? No. 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 It's weird because I can hear you. It's weird when I talk to you, when I hear you in the browser, but I can't hear you here. Because, sure, why not? I have no idea how to fix this. So let's do this. Let me see. This is hilarious, by the way. So that's there. That's there. That's there. Sorry, Kayla. This is. Now talk. Yes! Cool. Oh my gosh. All right. I don't know if anybody can hear on the stream now. Hold on one second. On the stream now. Anybody can hear on the stream. Hold on one second. On the stream now. Anybody can hear on the stream. Hold on one second. On the stream now. Anybody can hear on the stream. Okay. Well. Okay, you can still hear echoing. Well, I mean that's good because there's sound. So let me mute. Let me close that. All right. Let me close this. Let me close this. All right. Now say something. All right. I have no idea. Hopefully the folks in the chat will let us know if it's still echoing or not. But I'm going to continue the conversation. So, all right. So I don't know what you just said for like the last 5 minutes or more. So I'm just going to go completely out on a limb and say that you've talked about some really, really cool stuff. So let's just talk about, I guess we can talk about Windows Terminal for a little bit because I didn't want to talk about Windows Terminal right off the get, but I think we can have a conversation and then go back and forth. So, so obviously, I think a lot of people know what Windows Terminal is. But what I'm curious about in general is how, I don't know if you were involved initially when the project was kicked off or if you were kind of brought in a little bit later, but do you recall kind of what the discussion was about why Microsoft decided to build kind of a new terminal from the ground up, open source, just what went through that entire thought process?
add a pixel of margin or anything, everything would break. And the people that wrote that code aren't around anymore, so we don't want to break them. So
Sure.
that's kind of why we had to cut clean and start a new terminal. So then it went into, okay, what technologies do we build this with? How do we make it work in the way that we want it to with the latest technologies that we have available to us? And then at that time, the architecture was starting to get laid out, and then I joined in February of 2019. And they put me on because they didn't have a UI for it. They just had a terminal running, but it didn't look like anything. It just looked like the box that we already have. So I worked with the XAML team or the WinUI team to create what the tab view looked like on the top, and then also to figure out how the layout will look and the drop down and make sure things are not too obstructive because
Sure.
people don't want too many things on there, but still being useful and giving all the things that you need to do in a terminal. So that was between like March and May. And then I think in like April, we got the green light to go open source. And I distinctly remember popping champagne in a conference room when that got approved because we were so excited to do open source because that's like the new way that of technology, like everything new is going open source, and you get better contributions and better features from that anyway. So we got the green light in like April or maybe even late May. It was like right before, no, I think it was the week before build, we got full approval. So we had to take all of our code and put it in the repo and get it ready to launch at build. So then we went fully open source at the booth at build after we announced, which was really cool. We just hit a button, but it was cool. And then that's kind of where it all started. So that's like my timeline and how it fit in
Did
the
you have like
terminal.
a big like like the very well known office supply store where it has the button that you press? Was it like that, or was it literally just somebody just clicked the button inside of Git to push it, right? Or
Yeah,
the make or the private to toggle it to public button, right?
yeah.
I mean, one of the things that's very, I think that people are super fired up about and love about Terminal in general is the user experience, right? So I think obviously as it pertains to the editor itself, like I know there's been a tons of technical, like the actual behind the scenes, like there's a lot of technical changes that have come into place, but like the ability for it to you know, I don't want to say compete or replace other like third party tools that did similar things, but now it's like a first party offering that has a lot of things like tabs and fonts and ligatures and all these
Mhm,
things that I think people love with other terminals or with other editors, and now they have it, right? I
mhm.
think one of the things that's so I've been a pretty huge proponent. I saw the sexy sizzle reel when it first came out. I think it was at Build, like you said, and I was like, oh, well, this is something that I think is super cool. And I immediately got on the previews and I bothered folks like you a ton saying this doesn't work or, I would love to see this or whatever. And I
Mhm,
think one of the things that I was very captivated by and very impressed by is that how the team basically from the get said, okay, community, like you're driving this. Like
mhm.
we're still the team that's building the product, but we need all the community help that we can get. And,
Yeah.
I think that Terminal is probably up there with, the like the other really large open source things that Microsoft's doing, where the community is basically driving a ton of it, right? Like you think of
Mhm.
.NET, or you think of Code, VS Code, and then I think of Terminal, right? I think of like
Oh.
those three is like, and there's probably some other groups at Microsoft that are like, wait, we're open source, how dare you? But no, like I think that if you go to the Terminal repo, like there's tons of issues and there's tons of stuff going on, but
Mhm,
it's not just a oh, go to Stack Overflow and look at this issue, or whatever. Like that's not a feature. Like we're not going to do that. Like all of it is really thought out and planned, and the community is a part of it. So
mhm.
I think that's super super awesome. So what that leads me to kind of as one of the main I guess drivers of like new feature development and maintenance on other things is so what goes through what does the process look like when new feature work comes up? Like for instance, I know one of the really things that was near and dear to my heart was like context value, right? Like being
Mhm.
able to like right click and say open terminal here, right? And there was a ton
Yeah.
of solutions that people had basically hacked using the registry and things like that. Um, but there was some conversations. I followed the issue thread pretty religiously, and there was like some major things that needed to get done, right?
Hmm.
So when you talk about new feature work like that, like what goes into deciding whether or not, oh, this is a feature that we should bring in, or this is a feature that it would be great to see, but I don't think it's really for the best of the product right now, or the tool right
Um, so I think a lot of our inspiration comes from how other terminals operate,
now. Sure.
because all of our developers have used, before terminal was a thing, other terminals.
Yep.
So it's kind of a mix of how would you expect it to work, and like if it's coming from Microsoft, it should work really well with Windows, which is why like the Open Windows Terminal thing, Open Windows Terminal here thing was so important. But also those like other terminals have a ton of features that we don't have yet that we want to have and aim for. So usually it's a combination of what have like other people done, what makes sense for Windows, and then what is being heavily requested from the community. And when we plan our roadmap, we literally take our GitHub issues and sort by like most reacted to, or like
Sure.
most thumbs up or something, and that's like our priority list, which is pretty cool. So it's nice because it's less planning, like because I'm the PM, it's less planning for me because I'm like, all right, top 10, here we go.
Yep. Yep.
But it's cool because then everyone wants it too. So I feel like it's beneficial for both parties. Like people are getting the features that they want, but then it's easier for us to figure out, okay, here's the next thing because that's what makes sense. So that's kind of how feature planning goes. But we're basically just trying to make sure it's solid terminal experience first. And then if we get a PR for some cool feature that we didn't even think of, sometimes we just toss it in because it's cool. Um, like retro terminal effect, where you can get like a glowing text and scan
Yep.
lines.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Like, why wouldn't
Yeah.
you want that? But we
I,
didn't ever think about doing that. Um,
I will
so yeah.
say I will say one thing, like the memification of terminal is something that I'm guessing that the team didn't realize, right? Like the
Mhm.
second that you allowed to have like custom backgrounds, I assume the team wasn't thinking of, you know, Shia LaBeouf being like, the magic Shia LaBeouf meme being like, everybody's like go to like, oh, this is a great background in
Mhm.
terminal. I mean, like that is, I think that's one of the things that makes terminal so interesting, is like it is very customizable. It kind of reminds me, and this is not a knock by any means, but I don't know if you had the opportunity to be on MySpace when MySpace was like a
Mhm.
big thing. Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
like there was a point in time with MySpace where people could completely customize their pages, and it
Mhm.
was a nightmare. Like some people's profiles, like it would just crash like the browser because like of all the CSS and JavaScript that people would put in there. And I can kind of what I see, like whenever you tweet out or somebody else tweets out like, oh, what are your go-to profiles? And like some people are like, they're very practical profiles, like they have a different background per environment or whatever. And then some people are just like, I'm having flying unicorns as my profile. And so I say it's similar. Like it just allows people like the full customization to allow the personality to come out, which I think is super awesome. Another
Mhm.
thing that I think is really cool is that the team is very open about how hard things are. Like that's one of the things. That's one of the things that I think that um, larger maintainers of larger open source projects and projects in general, like I think they really have a hard time saying like, oh, this is hard. Instead, they
Mhm.
just like they'll say, "Oh, I can't do that right now," or "We'll get to that later." But I'll see folks in the team say like, "This is hard. Like this isn't just like a couple like changing a couple of lines of code. Like we have to like change completely how everything is being done." I can't think of an
Mhm.
example off the top of my head. I had one, but I lost it. But I remember saying like, "Oh, that should be like super easy though." But then like going through, I think it might have been Dustin or somebody was like, uh,
Probably.
yeah, he was listing out like all the things that would need to get basically changed, and he thought it was a great idea, but he's like, this isn't something that can go like in the next release. And I thought that's that's pretty brave, right? Because I think, especially as you well know, like when your code gets released to the wild, like people will think that it's either the best code or the worst code, and
Hmm.
they'll think that, oh, you can just change it to exactly what I want instead of what everybody wants. And I think it's pretty impressive to say, well, that's a lot of work. I'm not saying we can't do it, but it's a lot of work. So I don't know if we can take it on.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that's interesting, especially you from like a user experience or UX perspective, right? Is like there are tons of areas to grow
Hmm.
terminal from like a UX perspective. Like you mentioned, there's some other well-known terminals, and they have like fully fledged like settings menus and things like that. And I know that's one of the things that's probably number one request, or if not number one, like number two or three. And
Hmm.
that's not a small task. But you want to talk a little bit about kind of what the thought process is of that, how you're bringing in the community involvement to, um, what does settings configuration look like in terminal going forward?
Yeah, this is actually extremely relevant. um,
Cool. Well, I'm glad.
so that's like the biggest thing we're working on now. And what we've tried to be very open about the settings UI and how it's going to look and how it's going to operate. So we've had all of our specs on GitHub. And I think one of my blog posts I put like here's the current update of where it's at. And we're like if you go to like the feature slash settings UI branch, you could build it. It's on GitHub now. It's not done, but it's out there, and we're trying to work with as many people as possible to make sure that it's the experience that people want. So we try to keep everything out in the open, and I've been doing like mock-ups after mock-ups, trying to make sure that every like piece of it makes sense. Because we have even just yesterday, we there's in the JSON file, there's the default section at the top of your profiles, and then you can list your profiles out. And we're calling it we call it inheritance, but essentially your settings are inherited from that default section in that way. And it's like, how do we represent that to like someone who just installed terminal on the settings UI? And that was a big discussion we had yesterday. And there's a spec out for it, and I'm updating designs right now. So we're trying to be very open about it, and we're trying to get as much feedback as possible, because the more feedback we get now, the easier it is in the down the road. But it should be in our next release or the release after that. So it's coming very, very soon. But that's like our
That's
number
super
one.
cool. Yeah, that's like
Yeah.
the alpha. That's like the alpha drop. Um,
Yeah.
there's a couple of things I think that's interesting. One is that, uh, so I imagine that you're probably stealing some ideas from how VS Code does it, right? So
Oh
like,
yeah, all the
yeah,
time.
so
Yeah.
VS Code, like if people don't know, like the settings are all configured by JSON, but they have like these very simple UIs on top of it, right? And I think it works. Sometimes it's very confusing.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, as you get more complex, but that's not a VS Code issue. That's just a issue in general. But another thing that I thought was very interesting, and I took a look at the settings stuff a couple days ago just because I was curious. My first thought was how not Windows it looks, which
Oh
I thought,
really?
yeah, which I thought was like very cool, right?
Oh.
And here, no, no, no. So, and here's my thing, right? So, if you look at other, I guess, Windows applications,
Hmm.
and you look at the settings for them, they all look kind of similar,
Hmm.
right? Like it all kind of has like that Windows Forms look, or if it's a more modern one, it has like a more of like a WPF look. There's lots of boxes and lots of edges and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the fact that I think that the settings configuration, like it looks like it's a part of terminal instead of just like a module that was plugged in that doesn't really look anything like it. I think that's actually very well done. I don't
Oh,
know if
sweet.
that's the team's goal. If somebody's probably like, no, we want to look like Windows.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's something that I saw when I was looking through some of the mock-ups. Was like, okay, well, I like the approach. It's not saying that I don't like Windows themes in general, but I think
Hmm.
that, like as Microsoft, and as disclosure, Kayla and I both work for Microsoft, and I'm not speaking for Microsoft. But as we kind of move away from like the more traditional, like this is how Windows looks,
Hmm.
it's very important to not like have our new things kind of still look like Windows. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to you or literally anybody else, but I don't care. But I think that's one interesting thing to me, and I think another thing that's very interesting is just this concept about cross-platform,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know that people probably have talked about cross-platform a lot, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's something that the team would probably love to have. I know that all of the code is written in a way that's somewhat cross-platform because it's all written C++ for the most part. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like, what are the team's general thoughts about cross-platform? And like, obviously, it's called like people call it Windows Terminal. Like, I don't know if it would make sense to call it Windows Terminal on Ubuntu or Windows Terminal on Mac. But like,
Yeah.
um, but I'm curious to know, like, and this is like no teaser into potential roadmaps or discussions that people are having, but I'm curious what your thoughts are. Like,
Mm-hmm.
do other operating systems would they take advantage of something like Windows Terminal?
I think so. I think it would be very beneficial cross-platform. Um, we can't physically do it now because we have
Yeah,
dependencies that like we'd have to completely rework the entire terminal to get it to work.
things are hard. You say?
Things are hard. Yeah. Um, we've actually gotten a lot of requests to have it on Mac and Linux, so I don't see why like probably like way down the line
Yeah.
we could do it. Like we're just trying to make it as accessible as possible. So if that's one way of doing that, then we're definitely open to it. Just not like soon because
Yeah,
it's hard.
yeah, of course. And I think following similar, like for instance, like Edge or Edgium or
Mhm.
whatever you want to call it, right? Like the new Edge.
Yeah.
Like when that was ported over to Chrome, I think a lot of people, or not to Chromium, a lot of people were like, okay, well, this is exciting. And then it was very, very quick, right? Because it's using the same bits, uh, like as Chrome does, and Chrome runs on like basically any platform. So like it was very, very quick. Like I remember it changing on Windows, and then within it's been less than a year, and I think we just launched like an Edge on Linux.
Hmm.
So people aren't expecting um, I, I I don't think people are expecting it to happen like very very soon, but it's good to hear that the team is like obviously you saying that you want it to be accessible to everybody. I think that um, there are tools similar to that in other like I think also just a lot of people in general like the terminal experience in Linux and Mac, um, like the way it currently is, but adding like
Hmm.
something like uh, Windows Terminal or Microsoft Terminal or foobar terminal or whatever it's going to be. Like that would be interesting. So we got a
Hmm.
question. So Rambling Geek says hi, by the way. It says,
Oh,
will
hey.
Windows will Windows Terminal become default in Windows at some point? And that's a very interesting question because I think there's a lot of reasons to, but also probably a lot of reasons not.
Hmm. That is the goal.
Yeah, that's the goal.
I think that might be all I could say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, don't want to spoil things for folks, but I think like the obviously like I think of how a lot. So obviously, it being available via the store is very interesting, just because I
Hmm.
think the store, like if it's in the store, how I see is it's kind of like already a part of the operating system, um, to an extent, right? Like it's
Yeah.
literally like it's just like clicking a button. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, taking the step and having it being there on fresh install would be super cool. Um, I even was thinking about the other day. I was like, I would love it to be a part of features, like Windows features. Like,
Ooh.
so for instance, you go to Windows features and like how you can like turn on WSL or you can turn on Hyper-V or you can like having just a
Hmm.
button that says like Windows Terminal, and then that does basically what you'd be doing like going to the store,
Yeah.
but it does it for you. I mean, that's a bit more like super user because I don't think most users actually go to Windows features unless they need to turn something on they found in some blog post somewhere. Um, but I think it's like one step closer to making it be a part of Windows. So
Yeah.
tell whoever that that's what Isaac thinks is the best approach is to have it be a feature in Windows.
Okay.
Because everybody will listen to me. uh, so going back to this concept of like community, right? Um, and I'm kind of curious to see what like so you're obviously fairly new to Microsoft. You started I think you said about 2 years ago now, a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
So
yeah.
you said at the beginning, but I didn't hear you, so I'm just gonna guess.
Yeah.
Um, I th- so I'm curious to know like what's your general like. Obviously, a lot of the people that you work with don't work at Microsoft, right? Like you work with a lot of people that are on GitHub. You also have the product team and other folks, but I'm curious to know like what your general thoughts have been. As somebody just out of school, um, you know, coming from going into an environment where you're so dependent on people that you don't actually like share the same company with. I'm curious to know what your thoughts about that
Um, it's it's cool. I never really thought about it this way because well, I guess half of my career has been remote now, which is kind of weird to think about. So I interact with people on GitHub the same way I'd interact with my team, except I don't message them on Teams. I'll just do something on GitHub. But we, as like on the terminal team, we mentally think of other community members as like part of the team almost. And we'll we'll just like be talking and talk about like, oh, GitHub username, and just as if we're like friends with them and we've worked with them. So it feels like we just have a larger team. And since like I guess now everything is so remote that like it to me I'm like it doesn't make one difference one way over the other. And since Terminal is a very open project, like there's very few things that we don't put on GitHub. So I don't feel the need to like censor anything either with anyone else. So I'm just kind of like that's like it is hard, or like this is how Windows works, or we are hoping to do this one day, but like that's kind of it. And for our team we only have 5 devs, so it's nice to have all the other people on GitHub as well, just because they are able to make so many different things. Like one of our developers recently made the command palette, and there was some stuff missing, but the initial functionality was there, so we shipped it in preview. And then this past month, I think we got like 4 or 5 pull requests to improve the command palette from the community. And I was like, that's so awesome because it helps us work on like the hard stuff, but then we're also giving people fun things to work on. And it's nice because like the command palette is not entirely C++. There's also some XAML going on. So it's nice to give some people different technologies that they might be familiar with new tools that we're making. So it's fun to work with the community and to make something really nice for other people. So in my mind, we're kind of all just one big team. So it's kind of all the same.
Yeah, that's one thing that I was thinking about the other day. I was having a non uh, web interview style conversation with somebody about how like you have conversations with people on GitHub all the time, and unless they like have like a online persona where like they have a Twitter that's linked to their GitHub, which is linked to their LinkedIn or whatever, right? Like you don't really know who this person is, especially if they have like a really weird GitHub handle. So I was having this conversation. It's like, what do you think? Like, and we were talking about one particular person, and this is probably not fair because we were kind of making assumptions about this person based on their GitHub profile, right? Which is never cool. But like, it's like, what do you think this person like? What do you think like? What do you think they look like? Like, what do you like? Or not like in a derogatory way, but it's very curious that we have these conversations with people completely online. You never really see faces.
Mm-hmm.
I guess sometimes you see faces, but for the most part, you don't really see faces, and like you literally have no idea who they are. And I think that's, anonymity is something that I think is very, I guess, alluring of GitHub.
Yeah.
At least like because I do like another similar thing to this for the .NET Foundation, where we talk about projects that are part of the .NET Foundation, and I interview maintainers, and one of the things that I ask them to do is like, hey, can you give me a list of like top contributors that you have to your projects, and like they'll give me a list of GitHub aliases, and I say, well, if you have a name, give me a name too, and like I don't actually know this person's name, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, that's pretty cool. I mean,
Yeah.
like, and it's funny that you just casually will in conversations, like, team conversations, like you'll just drop GitHub aliases, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody knows who that person is. I think at some day, like in the future, like people are just going to like change their legal names to like aliases. Um, I mean, we're already kind of getting there. And, like we started off with like Prince, and then he became like an icon, like a logo. And they went back to Prince, but I think at some point, people are just gonna be like, crab apple or like strawberry shortcake or like whatever their GitHub handle is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know, like you mentioned, 5 devs, right? So that's something that's very interesting to me because, like, terminals, I mean, it's not huge. Like, it's not Visual Studio or Windows
Mm-hmm.
huge, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's a lot of code.
Yeah.
It's a lot of code. And I'm curious as to like how work gets managed, obviously,
Hmm.
because with a small development team, you just can't say, okay, well, these are the things that I think are best. Like you have to be very tactical, right? Like these are
Yeah.
things that we because you don't want to do like and I apologize that this is actually how the team does it, but you don't want to like ship one large feature, right?
Hmm.
You want to ship like maybe one large feature or medium sized feature with a bunch of accompanying or like smaller bug fixes or smaller like little enhancements, right? So
Yeah.
like when you talk about putting together a release with a team, knowing that you have like a very I guess, small or scoped amount of hours that the developers can work on. And I imagine, I don't know if they're fully aligned to terminal or they're aligned to a bunch of other stuff in terminals, like most of their work. But like, how
Hmm.
do you put together like, okay, this is what's going in a release, or this is when you're building out roadmap, right? Like, how do you
Hmm.
take into account that you have such a small team?
Yeah. So for background, all of our devs are fully on terminal. That's their only job. So that's awesome. And each dev has a specialty and an expertise in a certain technology for terminal. So one of them is like knows everything about accessibility. One made the renderer, so he knows everything about rendering. One did the hyperlinks. Someone's doing like mixed elevation or like hardcore Windows stuff. So it's everyone has their own kind of niche and like what they know. So if a new bug or a new feature comes in and it's relevant to one of those buckets, it gets assigned to them. So that's kind of how we divvy up tasks. And it's funny because like some people are like, oh, I want to learn more about the renderer, or oh, I want to learn more about like how this is done. But then other things come in that are like, well, you could do this way faster than someone else. You're gonna have to like fix the accessibility on this or something. Um, so it's tough to for them to like branch out and learn something new, but it's also nice because then it's a well-oiled machine of like who's doing what. And for release planning, we have this grid, and each dev is listed, and then each month is listed on the top in the columns, and then they'll spec out like here's how long I think this feature is going to take, and then we'll put it into a chart and figure out when we can release each item. And like for the settings UI, we have like 1 to 2 devs working on it, and that's like the biggest feature I think we've ever shipped because it's literally remodeling our entire settings infrastructure and then putting a user interface on top. So that is only 1 to 2 devs. So we have 3 devs doing other stuff like bug fixes or other small features or things like that. So that's kind of how we keep our releases not just one big thing, but also having the fixes and other improvements. And then the community has every single release. There's always community contributions, and those are always like bug fixes or small enhancements or even new features. So that helps round out the rest of the release as well. I think my last blog post, I think every single feature I listed except for like 1 or 2 was from the community, which was awesome. But that helped make our release something great because like the mixed elevation thing that one of our devs is working on, that takes some time because we have to get some changes in Windows and then bring it in and have it working. So he's been working on that and hasn't done too many other things. And then the settings UI is also taking up 2 more devs' time, and then we have 2 left. So that we couldn't get too many features in from our team, which is why it was so great that the community came in, especially last month, or I guess it was last week, but from the last month to get those other features in. So we have like bucketed devs, and then the community kind of fills out the rest, which is awesome.
I mean, it seems to me, like I said a bit earlier, like I've been a fanboy for a bit. That's one of the things that I always have found that's really really exciting is like the team will push something out, like maybe push it out to preview, or they'll it or to either to the preview in the store, or it'll be in a branch, and then all of a sudden like people will just start throwing in PRs to it.
Hmm.
I know because me, like before I got into the store, like I was doing builds like every couple of days, right? And it
Hmm.
was brutal, but it was
Yeah.
awesome because like literally like every single time I did an update, I got like all sorts of hot new bits. Um,
Mm.
and even some people like I saw on like in some of the GitHub issues, like they automated it in some way. Like there was like some weird thing in like in China, I think, where like some guy was like building it and then shipping it. Like I remember some weird stuff like that. But anyway, I mean, people were trying to find easy ways to like package it before they get to the store.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if anybody that's here actually built it, but it's a huge repo and it requires all sorts of like fun add-ons to Visual Studio. I mean, not fun, just like C++ fun, but it was like, why doesn't this work? It just works.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I guess my point is that like when people they can contributing, meaning that they're actually getting the code and they're following the build it yourself guides, right? Which I think is really cool. And I think that's a super interesting thing about Terminal is that I'd be curious to know, and I don't know if you know this, is like, do you know how many people actually install Terminal from building versus the store? Like, do you know what your percentages are? I don't know if you have that sort of telemetry tracking in Terminal, but it would be interesting.
We do. I've just never looked. I can
That'd be
check.
like that would be the most exciting thing ever. Like if you were to find out that like 80% of your users are like building it locally.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do it right now if you don't want to. But I think one of the things that's super curious to me is as somebody who is a bit of a tinkerer, like I love to bring things down and build it locally. And then the first things I get immediately frustrated if it just doesn't work out of the box. Like you do a clone and then a build and it works. Like that's awesome. And I think that's super exciting.
Yeah.
I was also trying the other day, like I was just curious if it would work. I was trying to build, so I have access to GitHub code spaces. And I was trying to build Terminal in code spaces. It didn't work, obviously.
Oh.
But because it's Linux, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But I was thinking like, oh, and then I thought maybe it'll work in Visual Studio Code Spaces, which is right now it's Windows. But yeah, no, that's something I'm going to try today. So I'll let people know if it worked. But if it works, man, that's interesting. And Michael, yeah, I know my audio is terrible right now. I don't know what's going on. We had all sorts of audio issues. Michael Crumb says yeah, so we had all sorts of crazy audio issues, and I had this weird hack thing going on where I'm routing Kayla's audio and my audio through like the same thing, but I think mine's getting distorted in the process. So just a reason for me to test these things before I get on stream. So apologies to everybody. So one thing that I think that's interesting to me about your experience, especially, like you mentioned, you've been like half of your professional career has been working from home at this point, and I'm curious, like how your experience has been. I imagine most of the team is based in the Seattle area, right? Or, yeah. So how has your job changed from going from working in an office to working at home? And the reason why I ask is because since a lot of your like interactions with developers is in GitHub anyway, like how much has things changed? Obviously, other than just going crazy because you don't leave your place ever.
Yeah. So one of our developers is actually in Wisconsin. So we've always had Teams meetings, but the rest of us would be in a conference room, and then he would just be like the biggest face on the screen. So that has changed slightly. And we also, like, our team is very close. Like, we're all really good friends, which is really cool. And so we got lunch every day together. So that also, generated ideas, and we're figuring out solutions just because we love talking about work. So we just kept talking about work during lunch. And then we would come back from lunch and go straight into like a meeting room and then have our team sync. And then I could just walk down the hall and ask them a question or figure out design or something. So that experience is gone. So then we've tried to mitigate that by having like a every other day lunch. But then during that lunch, we don't talk about work. So then it's like, okay, well, how do we have these conversations? So what we do now is we will schedule spec review meetings and just like fully discuss a feature from end to end, figure out the design, and make sure that the solution we come to is sound. Because it is kind of annoying to go back and forth on GitHub when we could just all hop into a call. So that's how we're kind of mitigating the specific, like with our team, how do we come up with these designs and features? But then outside of that, it's been kind of the same because we do put all of our work on GitHub. We never do any code outside of GitHub, and we operate in the same way that we would treat the community. Like everyone needs two approvals, and it goes through full
Yeah.
review and everything. So that all kind of stayed the same in terms of writing code and creating new features. It was more of the discussion and like vision of the product piece where it would just happen organically at work. Now we have to schedule time to make sure that we have these conversations. So that's kind of how it's differed. But other than that, it's kind of the same. I do miss, going outside, and now it's just raining every day. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know what part of the Seattle area you live in, but yesterday, so I live in Woodinville, which is over on the east
Oh,
side,
nice.
um,
Yeah.
and so we had this crazy hailstorm yesterday. Yesterday being November 17th for people in the future, and I was getting my kids out of the car like right as it started hailing, so I had to like sprint in and out of the car, and I was just like soaking wet, and my kid thought it was the funniest thing ever. But yeah, so that's the weather that we're getting right now. It's going to be raining for like the next week.
Hmm.
Actual rain, not typical Washington rain, which is interesting. Um,
Yeah.
so back to open source and terminal, not to talk about the weather. But so one of the things that I'm curious about, like you mentioned team calls, and
Hmm.
one of the things that I've seen with other open source projects, some at Microsoft, some not at Microsoft, is that so things like you have internal meetings still, which is important.
Hmm.
But some of these teams that do these internal calls, like they'll post the minutes, or they'll post um, or they'll live stream them, or
Ooh.
they'll have community calls where people can hop on, and it's more of a not it's not like a Q&A like help desk ish thing, but it's like a hey, like this is us finding ways to better engage with the open source community around the platform, around the tool. I was
Hmm.
wondering if anybody on the team has thought about that, or is that something that yeah, no, it just wouldn't work, or it would work, but we don't know if anybody would actually show up, or kind of
Hmm.
curious what your general thoughts are.
Yeah, we actually heavily discussed community calls a couple months ago, especially because like Build and Ignite, we couldn't physically go to
Yep.
anymore. So we wanted to come up with a way, at least for those events, have some sort of like booth experience where
Sure.
we could all just chat with everyone. And then we discussed like on the PM team. So my team also includes WSL and Power Toys.
Yep.
Um, so we were thinking of doing maybe like a rotation of like each one of us gets a call like per week, and then we can talk about each product separately. But one problem is that we don't really have good equipment for this. We probably need like a heavy duty mic and like a nice camera,
Yeah.
I think. Um, so and then the idea kind of died out just because I think we don't know if people would show up. I guess the only way to find out is
Yeah.
just do one.
I
But
mean,
we've definitely talked about it.
as somebody who's doing it, like everybody has a stream right now. Uh,
Hmm.
um, I think one of the things that is interesting. I don't know if you follow at all, like what the .NET and Visual Studio teams are doing, where they just get on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, and they just chat. Um,
Mm.
like even to the effect that like one of the .NET teams, they have like basically they go through like GitHub issues and prioritize them live on stream,
Oh.
which I thought is kind of interesting. And I don't know. I would need to look at the viewers, like how many people are actually paying attention. And I don't know if it matters or not, like how many people are actively joining in. But it just opens more community involvement up, which I think is interesting. And I think to
Hmm.
your point about like, does everybody want to watch like a Microsoft Terminal uh, open open community conversation every week? Like, who knows?
Hmm.
But I think WSL and Power Toys, like, I think that team, I think those three tools together, like, it's a lot of community involvement, right?
Hmm.
Like, you know, to be fair, like I'm fanboy of both of those things too. So like, I just think your entire broader team is like superstars. I think
Oh.
I think one of the things that and what's very telling to me is that those are like three very very heavily influenced by the community projects,
Hmm.
right? Especially WSL, right? And I know that
Hmm.
WSL is very close to your heart because of the WSL functionality that's in terminal.
Yeah.
But I think that I would like to see it. I don't like you mentioned like cameras and microphones and stuff like that. Um, I would personally say that it's probably not as important. I think just getting out there is important too. Um, like we don't all have lots of money to spend on hardware.
Mhm.
Even though people just do it like crazy. Um, I was having a conversation. Scott Hanselman. I was having a conversation with Scott Hanselman about just this, and he was like, "Yeah, like all of us dads like spent a bunch of money on like live streaming equipment, and now we have to figure out how to use all of it." And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty fair. It's pretty fair." But I think especially for me, it's been like this has been very helpful for me as somebody who, I liked going into the office and having conversations with people, and
Mhm.
I I'm in meetings a lot for work, um, but at the same time, like it's nice to just do other things that aren't Teams meetings, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Because Teams meetings, like I don't know how your team does Teams meetings, but it's very like bam, 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 get off the phone, or
Yep.
like bam, bam, we have like 20 minutes left now. What? Like,
Mhm.
and so like this is another at least venue for me, and like this isn't part of my job. I just do it for fun. But I think that it's interesting to see like how you grow more, I guess, conversation with the community over time. So I mean that's my 2 cents on it. You can say that's a great idea, that's a terrible idea, um, but like that's just a thought because I think that you would probably be surprised at the amount of people who join. I think
Mm.
you would. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if we're talking about millions, but like
Oh,
maybe like maybe 5 people. That's a
there
lot.
you go. That's on my team. So.
Yeah, exactly. At least you'll have 5 people on your team. Right? So as we start to wrap up, I think one of the things that I think it's really important to call out is that you do blog a lot about Terminal, which I think is super super awesome. You are very active on GitHub. Um, is there anything in general that you've seen from your time working on Terminal that you've appreciated or not appreciated just about the community in general? I'm curious because usually people have things good to say about community or about open source, but like I do know from personal experience, we all live in echo chambers and like you surround yourself with people that have same opinions of you, but when you come across people
Mhm.
with different opinions is when all the fun starts. So I'm curious
Yeah.
what your general thoughts are about just basically you work completely in the open, right?
Yep.
And what your experience has
Um, I
been.
really
And be
enjoy.
honest. And be
I
honest.
am.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoy working in the open. I genuinely appreciate a large volume of opinions and thoughts and like creativity from a lot of people. I think in my mind, I think the more people that have a say in something and like have shared their opinions, the easier it is for us to formulate a solution. And I think I've learned so much from being open source because I like things I never thought of is like German keyboards are a thing.
Yeah.
And there's different keys on there that have to work with terminal. And my mind didn't even think about that of like, oh, okay, there's like people who, speak different languages and that has to work in terminal. And there's different hardware out there that has to work. So being able to get these experiences firsthand and have these conversations with people, I think helps make for a better product. And I personally have had maybe like 95% like positive conversations on GitHub. So that's also really nice to have like a community that's also passionate about the project as much like as passionate as we are. So it helps kind of make like a family vibe of
Yeah.
like people who like working on this tool because and the tool makes lives better for people who use it. So that it kind of gives me like excitement and helps me enjoy my role more. So I feel like the more and like I think the more that we put out, the more that we get back, which is also nice. So I've really had a good time being open source. I think it's really awesome, and I think a lot of I don't think Terminal would be the way it is without being open source. So I think it's really a good thing. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
completely agree. I'd imagine that if we all of a sudden announced Terminal and it wasn't in GitHub and it wasn't like I don't want to talk bad about the team because I think everybody on the team is awesome, but I think that it would be substantially different if it
Hmm.
didn't have as much community involvement. One, there wouldn't be as many things added to it because you wouldn't have community contributions. But I think
Yep.
just in general, like as somebody who has seen the company I work for kind of go from a more like this is the stuff we ship and people use it, and if they don't like it, they can wait for the next update.
Mhm.
To more of a like dog food this stuff, play around with it, work with the teams that are building it. Like it's been, I've seen a general like uptick like in the I guess competency of our products and the stuff that we build.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that is because like there's no better like QA than the community. Like
Yeah.
even if they don't want to be a QA, like they're being a QA. Because if they hate it, they're either going to post an issue on GitHub or uninstall it,
Mhm.
or both. So I think that it's really impactful to you can only control like the people that work inside the fence, right? But like at the end of the day, like there's all these other people outside the fence that, like you said, how many times have you installed Windows and you click the button that says like, do you have an additional keyboard? You just say skip,
Yeah.
right? There's a crazy amount of people in this world that click that button and they have to configure their layout and all that sort of stuff.
Mhm.
And um, accounting for those people that are different than people in the United States that speak English is really important. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, accessibility as well, like people that have different things that they have to work through. I think it's
Mhm.
very, very important. And like you said, like as able-bodied people, like I don't ever think about, oh, like what if I can't like see this color, or like
Yep.
like what if this contrast is too hard for me, or like what if I need the font size to be like 70. Like these are things
Yep.
that I hardly ever think of until I start seeing other tools out there that I'm like, oh, like these tools are built because other tools suck. Like, and I think that that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think that that's part of one of the great things that I think about Terminal is that like there's been like this accessibility first mindset, right? Where people are,
Mhm.
like you said, you wanted as many people to use it as possible, and that includes not everybody that looks like me, not as many people that look like you, and
Mhm.
I think as many people as possible. And I think as more and more people use it, it's only going to make the platform better. And I assume you must feel the same way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. So we're wrapping up. So I want to thank Kayla so much for your time. Thank for being one for having a great conversation about Terminal and your open source upbringing, and kind of how you've experienced all these different things, kind of being new to I guess the Microsoft tech world, which is hard to navigate at times. And also
Mhm.
thank you for being so patient with all of the audio issues, because yes. When when we um when we sign off here, what I typically like to ask my guest is like, if you could describe open source in one word, or maybe a couple of words or a phrase, like what would that word be?
Ooh. I think diverse or diversity is probably
That's awesome.
the one that's coming to me the most.
Yeah, it's always a lot of people say community and collaboration. I think you
Mhm.
might be the first person that said diversity, which I love, because
Cool.
I think I think diversity is very, very important in all phases of life, but I think especially as we look at tech being, you know, a bit less straight white guy. I think that's probably, like I'm just gonna say
Yeah.
it, like being a straight white guy is probably ideal, for a lot of reasons. So we'll sign off on that. So I want to thank you again, Kayla. Thank you everybody for tuning in. This will go out to YouTube later today. So for everybody, enjoy the rest of your day and take care. Bye, everybody.
Thanks.